Welcome into the season finale of Giants Hangouts, brought to you by Crestron. My name is Madeline Burke, as always joined by Russ Salzberg and Matt Sytak. And as a season finale treat to you all, we are three in the same room for this one, at the same desk, all huddled up, three peas in a pod here, as we recap the 2024 season that was, and the big news, of course, Giants finishing the year 3-14 on the season, but John Mara wasting no time Monday morning, coming out with a statement saying in part that the team is retaining head coach Brian Daboll and general manager Joe Schoen moving forward. We heard from John Mara about the decision. We heard from Brian Daboll. We heard from Joe Schoen. We've heard from players as we recap the 2024 season that was. And the consensus, guys, seems that, you know what? Yes, 3 wins, not enough, but they are staying the course and committed to the process of moving forward with the plan at hand.
Listen, as we talk amongst ourselves in the dining room, here, there, everywhere. I've said all along, I believed that Joe and Brian would be back. I'm glad they're back. The easiest thing, is to appease what I call the loud minority. And the loud minority is, well, we got to make this change, we got to make that change. And a lot of that is stirred up by certain people in the media. To me, how many times have we mentioned on the Hangout that we've been in the locker room, we see what's going on, it's a good locker room, there's never been a demoralized locker room. Sure, the guys are angry when they lose a game, they're very upset about 3-14, but they never quit on Dave's, and that's very important. And as John said, continuity is very important. You don't change for the sake of making a change. That can sound good, it can sound sexy, but that's not the way it's done. And some people are not going to like me saying that, but that's reality. And they made the decision to let's move forward and get this thing straightened out. And when you listen to Joe and Brian talking, they're confident of getting the job done.
Yeah, 100%. We heard from all three of them, Mr. Mara, Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen, and all three acknowledged that this season just nothing was good enough from top to bottom. Between coach and Joe, they both, took responsibility for their own parts of, the Giants going 3-14, but they made it very clear nobody was happy with how the season went, the results, but they think that there are pieces in place to build upon to get to the Giants where they need to go, or where everyone wants them to be in 2025 and, even beyond. And even going back to last week in the locker room with a lot of the players, and then especially this morning when we heard from the players right after, the Giants put the statement out that both Brian and Joe would be back, every single player that spoke was happy that they would be back. Not a single one of them that at least we heard from wanted a change in the head coach or the GM. They were all happy with it. So I know, as you mentioned, there's, a segment of the fan base that we know will not be happy with this decision, but at the end of the day, the locker room, the players, they are happy about it. And at the end of the day, that is, in my opinion, the most important part of this whole decision-making process.
A lot of different guys mentioned the word continuity being so important, like you said. And Andrew Thomas, one of the captains of this team, who, yes, went out with a Lisfranc foot injury, but he said, I think we have buy-in. I think we have the right guys. We've just got to continue to add some pieces and be consistent. And like you said, this locker room, we've all been around this team for several years and seen some of the ups and downs, but this locker room really stuck together despite a lot of the adversity. And many of the guys in that locker room have said, I've talked to them today and have said, we've just got a really good group in here and we're committed to this process. And it's frustrating, of course, for a lot of Giants fans out there. It's frustrating for John Mara.
I'm glad you said that.
He was standing there earlier today saying, listen, nobody is more frustrated than I am right now. But he also acknowledges, he said, hey, we know I've made that decision before of saying, all right, we're going to pull the rug and start this over. But he acknowledged that sometimes when you hit the reset, you take 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And he said sometimes a little bit of patience is required. And that's what he's trying to do. And he says, if, this time next year, we're standing in the same position, then I'll take the heat. But right now I do believe in these guys.
Hey, look, you bring up John Mara and the fans. I get it. We always understand when fans are frustrated. Nobody knows that, and John Mara will tell you, nobody knows it better than him. But I also can tell all of you fans out there this, and I know there are many of you Giant fans out there. Nobody takes the losing of Giants games harder than John Mara. Nobody. And his father was the same way, and he's the same way. They take it personal because that's their life. They live with it every day. So when it just bothers me, and if you want to accuse me of waving big blue pom poms, that's fine. But you can fly planes overhead, you can do all that nonsense, but I'm telling you, nobody cares about the fans more than the Mara family and the Tisch family as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that feels pretty evident. I feel like, even for the fans that are unhappy, they can't argue with that fact. I mean,
right.
But even more so, like, everyone in this building wants the Giants to get better. And obviously, from top to bottom in every department, on every side of the building, like, everyone is doing their own part in just helping move forward and get the Giants to where we all want it to be.
Right. And a consistent key in doing that, of course, and something that was echoed in every media availability we heard from John Mara, from Brian Dable to Joe Schoen, is the importance of getting a quarterback. The Giants going into 2025 have no quarterback under contract currently, and that is a big positional need. And they have all said and echoed the idea of whether it be through free agency or the draft, there needs to be, that is the most important piece in building this team moving forward. And that is something that they're zeroed in on. And, the process of doing that is going to be important too. And the process is also something that John Mara acknowledged and said, hey, I've never seen the personnel process functioning as well as I have under Joe Schoen, which is a lot of the reason that went into this decision for him as well. But this process and this draft process, Joe Schoen, we just heard him speak as well, talking about how his scouts have been so imperative. Last year's draft, they had a player taken from each of his scouts' territories, which is a unique situation too. So they are going out there meeting with the players, but in terms of the quarterback, the importance on not just the tape and who this quarterback is on the field, but getting to know this guy as a person and spending significant time with these prospects, whether it be in the draft or free agency, is going to be an important approach.
Bang on. Listen, we all know there's no defending 3-14. Joe won't defend it. John Mara won't defend it. Days won't defend it. They all said, it's on me, it's on me, it's on me. But if we're going to talk about that, let's be honest and talk about their draft class from this past year. And John brought that up, and he's right. They had an excellent, a top shelf draft class. All those young men that they drafted contributed this season. All of them contributed this season. Now they go into the draft they moved up one spot from 4 to 3. So that, and you know what? I'm not convinced one way or the other if they're going to draft, if they're going to do something with free agency, if they're going to trade. I'm not sure what they're going to do, but they're in a position where they can do something and be successful with getting a quality person to perform in the most important position in football, which happens to be the quarterback position. Not just in football, in sports. Well, the most important position.
And also important to point out, too, that right now it is January, and so much changes between January and April in terms of draft boards and draft positioning. We're going to see a lot and learn a lot about these prospects over the coming weeks, over the combine and draft analysis as well. So that's going to evolve as well, Matt.
Yeah, 100%. But Russ, you took the words out of my mouth. I was literally about to say that not only is the quarterback the most important position in football, but it is the most important position in all of sports.
And second ain't close.
Yeah,
no,
like
right.
100%. And obviously the quarterback position was a very popular question, both in the locker room and to Mr. Mara, to Coach Dable, to Joe. And yeah, Madeline, as you just mentioned, it is a long process with figuring that out. It's not going to be something that's going to be figured out. Today's January 6th. It's not going to be figured out today. It's not going to be figured out tomorrow or even next week. The Giants need to go through the evaluation process, both with the draft prospects, which obviously, as we all know, there are 2 college quarterbacks that are considered to be the top tier of these draft prospects, but there are also other quarterbacks that are going to go later in the draft that the front office might decide one of those guys is better as like a somewhat of a developmental prospect, and to fill a different need with the third overall pick. There's also free agency. I mean, we know of a handful of veteran quarterbacks that are going to hit free agency come March, but again, it's the day after the season. Between now and the start of free agency, there will be more veteran quarterbacks that are currently on a team that will end up being a free agent and available for the Giants to pursue. So there are a lot of different avenues the Giants could go in finding that next quarterback. It wouldn't surprise me if they went with a veteran and then drafted someone as well. I mean, as you said,
Well,
I think Tommy DeVito is
they
the only
need multiple quarterbacks.
Yeah, Tommy DeVito is the only quarterback I think that is at least most likely to be back with the quarterbacks from this year, just because with his free agent status, I believe he's like an exclusive rights free agent.
Yeah, I
which,
think he's the only one that
Yes.
they kind of have in fold,
makes
whatever
it
you want.
a lot easier for them to bring him back at a reasonable rate. But they need to just fill out the room. They need bodies to go through the offseason program to get through training camp. So there will be multiple quarterbacks added through multiple different avenues.
And as Joe Shane pointed out in his presser today, he says, hey, we're in good salary cap situation, and we've got draft capital that we need to make some changes.
What do you say? It's something like it's $40 million in cap space this year and $100 million the following year. Well, let's not worry about the following year. Let's get things straightened out in this coming year. But Matt, you brought up also the draft and where you can get somebody. And listen, let's be frank. And I say this always, not just about football. I say it about baseball too. We're not scurrying. We're not at every college game. We're not watching the guys work out. I say that always about baseball, about beating the bushes and going to the minor leagues. We can't make an assessment. I don't know if there's a draft pick down in Timbuktu or Podunk, wherever. That's up to the scouts to assess that. And sometimes, hey, I'm not remotely saying we're getting somebody in the 6th round a la Tom Brady. I'm not saying we're getting somebody in the 3rd round a la Joe Montana. But that's up to the scouting department and Joe and his men to figure out. And listen, John Mara said, go ahead and do it. I believe in you. They believe. What's very important is they believe in themselves. Joe said several times, we have a plan, we have a process. And you know what? Sometimes you have to have the courage to stick with the process, especially when things aren't going well.
Right,
that takes guts to do.
And to trust the decision that you initially made, right? They initially chose to hire these men and to give them the landscape to execute their plans. And they have to trust that decision they made and see it through. And that's what they're choosing to do.
As Joe said, he was asked, I'm paraphrasing now, if you can go back on the decisions or what, the past year or two. And Joe said, we had a quarterback coming off a knee injury.
Right.
We didn't know what was going to happen. So we had to be ready. Yeah, we were hopeful, but you don't know. And that's all part of the process.
You do the best you can with the information you have. And of course, hindsight is 20/20. And a lot of people will look and say, oh, could have done this, should have done that. Had it worked out well, nobody would be saying that because, again, you make the decisions you have with the information you have. Now, that being said, the Giants have also said that there will still be some decisions to be made. Today is Monday. Of course, the head coach and general manager are remaining in place. But they've also said that they're going to be meeting throughout the week, not just with the players today in their exit interviews, but with the coaching staff, with each other to determine what changes need to be made. John Mara pointed out his frustration with the defensive production this year, saying, you know what, I'm adamant that I didn't like seeing teams go up and down the field on the Giants. Brian Dable acknowledged that he brought up the possibility of perhaps not calling plays next year, and that's something that he's going to consider. So whether it's changes to the coaching staff in a sense or changes to the procedures, they know that the importance of a self-scout and looking in the mirror, Matt, and saying, okay, something needs to change because not just personnel and getting a quarterback and all that, but also something needs to be tweaked to adjust course.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like everyone that spoke today, from the players to coach to Joe, everyone said basically some form of, I need to look in the mirror, see what went wrong this year, and figure out how to change it and improve it to get better for next year. I mean, again, as Joe and Dave's both mentioned, it was just not good enough from top to bottom. There's, very few people. I mean, even Malik Neighbors, who had the record-breaking rookie year, he mentioned unprompted, I left some plays on the table there. Like, obviously happy with how the season went, but it could have been even better. So everyone in this building is just, going to spend however long, days, weeks, months, figuring out what it is that needs to be done to improve in their part of this entire operation to get the Giants back on track, to get the Giants where every single person in this building, the fan base, everyone wants this organization to go. So everyone is going to do their part in helping improve themselves to get the Giants back to where they ought to be.
You know, I'm glad you brought up Malik, because if you go back to the beginning of the season and the way, you know, Brian described him as a dog, a D-A-W-G, you know what? He proved this year, without a shadow of a doubt, he is a dog. He comes to play. Listen, he was beaten up this year. He took his lumps pretty good. He missed 2 games, you know, and he has, what's the final total?
1,204 yards, 109 catches, 7 touchdowns.
I knew she was going to come. No, but you think about that, and that was missing 2 games with 4 quarterbacks. You know, and another factor, since we're talking about that, how about Wan'Dale Robinson with 93 catches?
Yeah.
You know, think about those 2 young men with the quarterback who's going to get them the ball.
I got to say, too, I did a sit-down interview with Malik Neighbors this morning, which is coming soon to Giants.com, and one of the things I asked him was, what's he going to remember most about the 2024 season? You know, I mean, he said record and franchise record in the 100th season and this and that. And you know what he said? He said, you know what I'm going to remember is Wan'Dale Robinson. That's the first thing that he said, is how good of a player Wan'Dale Robinson is, and just went on for about how impressed he is at what a skill set that guy has. And those two, being the lion's share of the passing game, and like you mentioned, Russ, when they have consistency at quarterback, and then, you know, we heard Joe Shane talk about it too, Jalen Hyatt, a player who didn't really get very involved in the offense this year, and Shane says, listen, this is a guy who's a downfield threat, can take the top off of defense. Once we have a quarterback that can utilize that skill properly, perhaps there's something there.
No, it's again, 3-14. I'm not happy. They're not happy. Nobody's happy. We know you're not happy. The management is not happy. It is what it is. It's got to get better. But Joe Shane and Brian Daboll have been told, go make it better. We're not abandoning the ship. We want you to make the ship better.
Yeah, and, you know, even with the struggles, especially on the offensive side of the ball this season, obviously we know, other than the Colts game, the offense really struggled this year. There's no denying it, but it seems to be that the general belief from a lot of people in this building is not that it's going to cure everything about all the issues the offense had, but getting the right quarterback in this building to lead these group of playmakers that the Giants have is going to go a long way in helping improve this offensive unit. I mean,
look at the turnaround Washington had.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we see it every year with a couple of teams, you know, put that quarterback into a new situation, and all of a sudden the team goes from, I'm not going to say worst to first, but, you know, a big turnaround. And, you know, Joe mentioned some of the playmakers that the Giants have on offense. Obviously, there's Malik, who just had this record-setting year as a rookie. Wan'Dale Robinson, as you guys mentioned, 93 receptions, ranked 13th in the NFL.
And a career high for Wan'Dale.
A career high by a wide margin as well. You know, mentioned Jalen Hyatt. Is, you know, haven't seen a ton of production, but there's still full belief in Jalen Hyatt in this building. Theo Johnson had a very promising rookie season. Tyrone Tracy had a very encouraging rookie year as well.
And I don't think, I don't think any of us expected that coming from him. He had one heck of a season.
I was very high on him coming into the year, but even I did not expect him to have the season that he had.
Yeah, no, I didn't. You like I said, I didn't know.
The bell cow.
And I think the most important piece to this entire, you know, discussion about the offense, obviously, it's the quarterback position, but very close second is the offensive line. And I know when you look at the season as a whole, you might think, oh, the offensive line did not perform up to, you know, the standards, but the first 6 games of the season, the Giants had the same starting 5 offensive linemen for every single snap. And the offensive line in those first 6 weeks was significantly better than what we ended up seeing after that. And
subsequently,
obviously
10 different combinations
which is crazy. And obviously the biggest part of that is Andrew Thomas. I mean, we talk all the time. He is the Giants' best offensive tackle, offensive lineman. He's one of the best players in this team and one of the best at his position in the entire NFL. Not that you can point all the, you know, problems to one injury, but we knew once he went down, it was lost for the year, that was going to be a big blow to the offensive line. And that's exactly what happened. He's expected to come back fully healthy for next year. 4 of the 5 starters from the offensive line will all be back next year. Joe mentioned, probably bringing in at least a couple of new guys as well. But the core of this offensive line that had success in the early part of the year will be back. And I think that is a very encouraging thing for this offense.
Well, and that is also the constant. You look at the 3 seasons with head coach Brian Dable. First season, coach of the year, playoff team. Second and third season, disappointing, we'll call them. What is the consistent factor between season 2 and season 3? Andrew Thomas goes out early with an injury. Things get askew. Not saying that is the only reason.
No, but
it
it's a
is
major factor.
Major factor and an impactful one, especially a player that, Dable has said many times in training camp, every position is open for competition except for left tackle. Tongue in cheek, yes, but the importance that Andrew Thomas is to this team, the left tackle, blindside, that is one of the most important positions on the football field.
We always say next man up. You know what? That's true. It has to be. That mentality is what you have to take.
That's a hard man to replace.
But there's also a reason why guys are starters and guys are backups. So it's hard for the backup to replace the starter because otherwise he'd be the starter. There's a reason why you're a first stringer and a second stringer, and Thomas is a first stringer and then some.
And then some, indeed. All right, well, we are turning our attention now to the offseason because the Giants 2024 season, the 100th season of the Giants franchise, is behind us. Rest easy, Giants fans. You did it. You made it through 18 weeks, 3-14. It's not how we wanted it to go, but you know what? We learned a lot. We had some good times. We had some memories. And we had 18 episodes of Giants Hangouts brought to you by Crestron. It has been fun hanging out with you guys this season and doing this show.
Very much so.
Yes.
Very much so. Looking forward to next season as well.
Looking forward to it. As always, for Matt Sytek and Russ Salzberg, I'm Madeline Burke. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time.